Strange but true stories, tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. One of our recent videos, titled 2 True Stories of Something Protecting Us, featured a story about a guy known as Dakota, who talked about meeting an ethereal little girl he called Olivia, who helped him through some tough times in his life, and that this little girl may just be the daughter he doesn't have yet, but will meet in the future. His story also mentioned how he helped other people with their issues, though he didn't really go into detail about that. If you haven't watched that episode, check that one out when you can. Anyway, we received a story from a woman who saw that video and wondered if it was the same person who helped her and her family out several years ago. The 2 stories aren't connected really, except the common thread of Dakota, but it was a reminder of just how small a world it can be sometimes. And it's a really cool story. About 6 years ago, there were some strange things that were happening at my home. At first, it started with strange knocks around the house, then it would turn into voices, and then shadows. In the beginning, I thought it was my 2 young daughters messing around at night when they should have been in bed, and my youngest was the type who'd hide in a corner just to scare somebody. I'd look in all the usual spots, but I couldn't find anything. My husband and I were having marital issues at the time that often escalated into loud verbal arguments, and anytime I tried talking to him about it, he'd just continue fighting. I work for a local newspaper, and one of my colleagues interviewed a paranormal investigator in the area to include in a ghost anthology she was working on. I believe it was called Hauntings from the Snake River Plain, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I reached out to her to see if I could get his information. She gave it to me, and I went to talk it over with my husband, who got more agitated. We were in the living room arguing again about it, and then a mug from our kitchen counter flew 10 feet into the room and hit him across the face. There was nobody in the kitchen, or in the rest of the house for that matter, who could have thrown a mug that far. We were both stunned by that, but he just said, "Fine, call him. I'm going out." He stormed out of the house, and I reached out to the ghost hunter. His name was Dakota. My colleague only gave me an email address to contact him with, so I spilled as much information I thought was relevant, and I told him all about the activity that was going on and the fact that my house was built about 2 years prior when my family and I moved in. I didn't mention anything about my husband and I having issues, but told him that I was concerned for the safety of my daughters. Within the hour, I got a reply. "I'm sorry to hear about your situation, and I would very much like to help. For your children's safety, it might be best if we move quickly to resolve this issue. I can be there in about 2 hours if you're able to meet with me, as this is a matter best dealt with in person." He ended his email with a phone number to reach him. I called him right away and told him tonight was fine. When he arrived at my home, he was this large-figured man. He wore a leather bomber jacket and jeans, basically nothing like how I had imagined him. I welcomed him inside and gave him a tour of the house. As we walked around, he had a digital recorder turned on. I guess to document everything I had to tell him. Well, during the tour, his attention seemed to constantly be drawn to random parts of the house like he had heard something, but I couldn't tell what it was. When he walked past the couch that was in the living room, he suddenly stopped. "Ma'am, may I ask you something real quick?" he asked me. "Sure," I told him. "Who got hit right about where we are standing?" How did he know that? My husband was standing right where Dakota was standing when he was struck by the coffee cup. "Yeah, my husband did. We got into an argument, and a mug that was sitting on the kitchen counter flew and hit him." Dakota had a look on his face like he already found out the cause behind everything. I couldn't help but tell him then that my husband and I were having some issues, and things were starting to get pretty heated. He must have seen me trying to hold back my emotions as he extended his arms to comfort me. It was hard dealing with this, and it just felt nice having someone hear my side of things. I just have one more question. Who is Margaret? This question shocked me. What do you mean? There's a woman here who's acting like she's been trying to talk to you. I can't get a good feel on her, but she's really worried," he elaborated. "Is she your mother?" She was. I'd always felt my mother was watching over me since she passed away back in 1995. But actually hearing from a stranger that she actually was around was a little overwhelming because when my daughters were younger, they used to talk about their Grandma Maggie playing with them. I just brushed it off as overactive imagination. I told Dakota about this, and he just nodded. He then asked if there were any family heirlooms I had of hers in the house, and I showed him a bunch of necklaces I kept in a jewelry box in my bedroom. "That might explain it," he mumbled to himself. After a few more questions about the house and if my kids ever acted like they saw something, Dakota told me that he had enough to go on. He asked if there was a date that worked so he could do a full investigation inside the house, and I told him that I had to discuss a plan with my husband before I could set anything up. He told me he understood and said to keep him in the loop in case something happened. I showed him to the door, and just before he left, he turned to me and said, "I'm terribly sorry about everything that's been going on, but I promise you that we'll get this figured out. You have my word. Please feel free to reach out if you need any help, even if it's just to talk." I told him I appreciated his help and watched him drive away. Fast forward a couple of days to when my husband finally came home. He had been known for disappearing after an argument, but this was the longest he had been away. I asked him how he was and told him that I had a paranormal investigator at the house. He pouted and asked how that went, and I told him that the ghost hunter, I didn't reveal Dakota's name at that point, wanted to set a date so he could take a better look at the house. I saw my husband get agitated, and he started clenching his fists. "No! I don't want some stranger in my house looking for your made-up ghosts." I won't go into detail about what followed, but my husband was scaring me and the girls like never before. It kind of felt like he was possessed. I sent an SOS to Dakota in hopes he'd try to help, as he had mentioned that he had friends in law enforcement that knew about his research. 20 minutes later, police arrived and arrested my husband. Dakota appeared soon after to check on us and handed me a disc with a note inside the case. He said he couldn't stay for long because he had another client he needed to help, but he made sure to explain everything in the note. As he left, I set the disc aside and just focused on making sure my daughters were okay. After a few days, I gained the courage to finally put the disc in my laptop to see what it was all about. And as it loaded, I read Dakota's note, which he had typed out. "With all due respect, it appears that a full investigation will not be necessary. The audio recording I took while you showed me the house had a few EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena, that caught my attention and seemed to paint a story. When I arrived at the house, I took a photo with a regular digital camera just for documentation purposes, and that too seemed to capture something that might be of interest to you. When you go to watch, listening with a pair of earphones might be helpful to understand what is being said. I go into detail about my findings on the disc, but to sum up everything, it appears that you are experiencing what I call post-traumatic psychosomatic manifestation, or better explained as the Carrie syndrome, the Stephen King novel. This is when emotional distress is the root cause of paranormal activity that can often be compared to poltergeists or even alleged demonic activity. The best way to get it to end is to remove the source of the emotional distress. In your case, it is most likely your husband. As much as it pains me to say this, it appears your husband has been unfaithful and your mother was trying to warn you. It is unfortunately very common for disloyal partners to become abusive. I can imagine that one of your first thoughts might be centering on the identity of the other woman. I'm terribly sorry. Please hold on to my contact information should you or your family ever need anything. Just remember, this is not your fault." I broke into tears reading the note, but started to watch the video. I opened with a photo of the front of my house, and a familiar figure was looking outside one of the living room windows. I listened to all of the voices Dakota captured, bursting down into more and more tears with each finding. It was my mom, trying to warn me about everything. My husband and I have been 6 years divorced now and have gone our separate ways. My daughters and I have been on our own and have never been happier. I have thanked Dakota countless times already, each time he came to check on us. But, Dakota, if you're listening, thank you for helping us. You really saved us, and I hope you keep going on the path that you're on. You are gifted. Thank you for giving the opportunity to share this story. It really helps release a lot of emotion and show people other things that are out there in the world. And thank you for sharing your story with us. This has been another Strange but True Stories. Do you have a story you would like to share with us? Maybe you too have come into contact with Dakota and been helped by this modern-day superhero. We'd love to hear about it. Send your true account to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this story in the comments below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out our website, and Christmas is creeping closer. We have merch at teespring.com. You can search Strange But True there, and maybe come up with some last-minute gift ideas. Thanks for the great support and for watching this video. I'm Steve White. Until next time.